It was fine. Fine. It's a nice drive. As long as your air conditioner's working. Gas is cheaper there. I got gas at 117. I went out to Moshe yesterday. It's not worth the drive. Yeah.
You drive out there just to fill up and come back.
Just yes,
To save the 10 cents a gallon.
Have to take, drive there back, and I saved 6 cents a liter.
Okay.
That's called food stroll.
Hi, good morning. Okay, so let's take a look. So yesterday, what we saw is that if a creditor loses the promissory note, or so he claims, the debtor still has to pay back the money. Okay, still has to pay back the money, but the creditor has to provide him with what's called a shovar, a receipt to show that he cannot go and recollect on this loan. If the borrower claims that he's worried that he's going to lose the shovar, so then he has a right to demand of the lender to indemnify him of any future loans, like any outstanding loans. So that would be one way of doing it. Okay. So that's one of the things that we had learned yesterday.
We learned right at the very beginning that if the piston turned up in the city at one thing, and the piston, the meeting had the money, and it wasn't putting them out of pocket, that they could do a transaction. But then if the person who was the
Borrower.
sorry, the borrower, yeah, the person was meant to have the star to say that they were owed the money, didn't have the star, they couldn't do it. Why in that instance couldn't they just do a receipt, a dated receipt?
You could.
But this has a right to refuse.
He does have a right to
That's the
refuse. And say, bring me the receipt. But if the guy claims, you mean I have to schlep all the way back to Toronto? I'm here now. Why don't you just pay me and I'll give you a receipt, and then I'll mail you the promissory note later, or I'll show you on video that I tear it up.
True.
Yeah, right.
I just listened to yesterday's share just now. It sounds like the guy who came into New York could have said, instead of saying, I forgot the receipt, he could have said, I lost the receipt, and then the individual would have no choice. So because he's truth-telling and saying, I left it back home, on that basis he can refuse. But if he said I lost it, then
I mean, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're saying that he has the rights of argumentation, that he could have said he has a migu.
yeah,
He could have said something else. Well, perhaps. But yeah, I think in the final analysis, as long as the lender is prepared to write him a shovar and indemnify him publicly, or however the guy wants it, from any outstanding loans. I mean, there are ways to protect yourself, right? So
so he should really
yeah.
do the transaction.
As long as as long as
himself.
as long as he's protected himself. Yeah,
Mhm.
correct. Next she'ila. Misha misupak im lova mechavero. Let's say a person is not sure. Did I borrow money from you? The chavero toeng shabori lo shehil velo sikum kesef kach v'kach. And the guy that he's not sure if he borrowed money from says, I'm certain that you owe me the money. Like, yeah, a month ago, when you needed something, I put out 20 bucks for you, and you said you'd pay me back. And the guy says, are you sure? I'm not sure if I borrowed that money. Ha'im yesh alav chiyuv l'shalem keven shechaveru bori lo shenasan lo halva. So in that situation, does the debtor have an obligation to pay him back? Now,
Yes.
now, in a situation where the debtor says, I don't know what you're talking about, bring proof that I borrowed money, or I'm not dealing with you. So then clearly we have a principle called hamotzi mechavero alav haraya, that if you want to extract money from someone who's denying it, you have the burden of proof is on the extractor, not on the person who has the claim against them. Okay. But here the guy says, I just don't remember. maybe we had a couple of drinks and I was, so maybe he called an Uber for me or something, but I don't remember you paying for it. I thought I paid for it, or
I'm just not sure.
I'm not sure. Oh, hamotzi mecharvero olav lahavi rayu pater mitashlum midei chiyuv latzis yidei shamayim chayav o af michiv yidei shamayim pater. So would you say that he only has, let's say, an ethical imperative to fulfill heaven's directive because he doesn't know? Or in a case of Bori Vishema, where the creditor says, definitely you owe me the money, and the debtor says, I'm not sure, then does it become now a halachic obligation? So tshuva, misha mesupakim lova mechavero v'halato in bori shehilveyu, yesh lo lihishava shvuas hesed she'enu yodeya upoter mitashlum. So the initial response that he gives is that if a person is prepared to take a shvua that he doesn't know, so then he can exempt himself. The problem is we don't take shvuas anymore today. He says, "Va'afal pisha midine adam pater v'ol chayv latzis yidei shamayim u'lashalem." But he says, nonetheless, he has an obligation in heaven to fulfill any kind of possible outstanding debt that he has. But let's say both of them are in doubt. If both of them are in doubt, so then there's not even a heavenly obligation. Yeah, we both had a few drinks. So none of us remember. Neither of us remember. So in that case, there's not even a heavenly obligation. Now, I don't believe we paskin this way. I believe we pass, but let's go a little bit further. So let's say another case. Let's say the debtor knows that he had borrowed money, and he's not sure, did I pay you back or didn't I pay you back? I think maybe I paid you back. And the creditor says, you borrowed money and you haven't paid me back. So then chayev b'dinei adam. So that's where there's definitely an obligation, because it's not just that the lova isn't sure whether he ever borrowed. He knows he borrowed, but he thinks he may have paid him back. So then, because the creditor is bari, he's certain that he never got paid, and the lova is also certain that he borrowed, is just not certain whether he paid it back, then halachically everyone would agree that he has to pay the money. The im hamalva mesupakim paralo ilav. So, but let's say both of them are not sure whether the guy paid him back. Yesh lelova latzeis yidei shamayim. So then there's a heavenly, at least, obligation for the debtor to pay it back. Unless the creditor says, you owe me nothing. If you paid me back, great. If you didn't pay me back, I don't want you to pay me. It's fine. I'm moichel. So in that situation, azai pater off, let's say, slidei chiyuv yidei shemaim. So then you don't even have a heavenly obligation, right? Now, v'im shneim yodim shilveyu shahisa kan halva beinehem elahem misupakim besikum ha'alva. Let's go to the next case of uncertainty. Let's say they both acknowledge that a loan has taken place, but the only thing they're not sure is how much was the loan for. I don't remember whether it was 100 or 200, okay? So yeshlo l'shalim kama shaborer, usha'ar hasikum shemistapik bo poter af milot seis yidei shamayim. So if they both don't remember, let the debtor pay back what he knows for sure he borrowed. Like I know for sure it was either 100 or 200, so he's got to pay the 100.
Because they agree on that.
Because they agree on that, right? And even the debtor is aware of it. The debtor is certain that he borrowed at least 100. And for the other, he doesn't have a heavenly obligation because the creditor also doesn't remember. V'yesh omrim she'enu yotze yidei shamayim ela ad sheyitpasher imo b'mesh yuchal v'rak az yotze yidei shamayim. However, there is an opinion that says that you have to come up with a compromise with your creditor and to make sure that he's moichel anything extra. If he says, look, I don't remember how much I lent you, But I'm not moichel if you borrowed more and you're only giving me 100. If you really owe me 200, I'm not moichel on that. I just don't remember what you. So then he's got to ask him, well, listen, how much should I give you to the point where you're moichel? So that because I don't want this to be looming over me in Shamayim. So then you should find out and be done with it.
Hmm.
So there is so this whole thing is a bit controversial because normally uh, there's no there's no vow that you take on when you don't know what's going on. And so this whole idea that a person can take a vow that he doesn't know or he doesn't remember is a bizarre kind of shvua. It's what's called the shvuas heses. It's a rabbinic shvua that goes above and beyond the principles of the Talmud. And in our Batei Din, we don't do these things anymore. Okay, so I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I would agree to the psak that he says that if the guy is doesn't know if he lent money or not, if he borrowed money or not, and the creditor says you definitely did borrow money from me. I think that in that situation they have to come up with some compromise because we don't allow a shvuas esses in Beis Din. So I don't know why he would say that. I want to research this a little bit more. Okay, next shaila.
I guess the moral of the story is we always learn is you should have paper.
Always have paper. Yeah. She'ela, Misha Hilvila Adam Ploni, Ela Sheyesh Lo Chashash, Sha'alo Verotza Lahavriach Et Nechasav Lifnei Sheyagia Zaman HaPiraon. Guy lends someone money, and he's concerned that this person is going to try to divest his entire estate to avoid paying back the loan. He's going to figure out a way to get rid of all of his entire estate. Maybe he'll give it to his kids, or he'll figure out a way to, and then he'll figure out a way to get out of the loan. So what kind of protection does a creditor have? Ha'im yachol aleches lebeis din b'toch zman ha'alva k'dei shebeis hadin ya'akvu al halo v'shlo yuchal la'asot kain. So can I proactively ask the Beis Din? Well, this is assuming that I don't have a lien on his property, because let's say it wasn't a written loan. So do I have a right to ask the Beis Din to intervene and prevent the debtor from divesting? Ella ad sheyagia zman hashtar v'yifra l'malva v'rak acharei chen ma sheyirtza la'asos b'mamono harishus b'yado. So do I have a right to, let's say, go to Beis Din before the loan is matured, tell them what I suspect, and then the Beis Din has a right to intervene? And then, whatever he wants to do after he pays me back, fine.
In secular law, there's a thing called a Mareva injunction.
Mareva?
Mareva injunction, it's an injunction that a creditor can ask the court in a motion, even ex parte, without giving notice to the debtor, if there's really strong grounds. He's going to skip the country or make it such that you won't be able to collect from him, or he's divesting himself from his assets, and you can get an order that will prohibit him and the banks and anybody who has contact with his property freezing it. It's basically a pretrial freezing order. That you can't touch his assets, and it's there for the taking later.
Is this unique to Canada?
No, it started in the UK, and it was based on a ship named the Mareva.
I wonder where the name.
Yeah, and they didn't pay the harbor master or whatever it was, so he went to court for the first time because the judge made law, common law, didn't recognize this kind of relief. It's an equitable relief, and the court basically said for the first time, we're not letting the ship go. So they arrested the ship. Essentially, that's what they do, and they held the ship until the case was heard, and I think they collected on the boat. So
Wow.
from then on, I don't know how old it is, 200 years or something like
Yeah,
that. They do
case
it
law.
again. Okay. Very hard to get, but you can get.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So now, so the question is, what is there such a protective mechanism in halacha? So he says the tshuva is mish chayiv mamon la'adam ploni, v'natan kol asher lo la'acher kedei lahavkia. So let's say someone is a debtor and he divests all of his money by giving it to a gift to a third party. Oh, shekosev kol nechasav la'acher, or he, instead of physically giving it, he just writes a shtar that says all my assets go to so and so. Ve'achar kach lova me'acher kedei lahavriach miba'al chovo shelo legavos v'yochal min ha'acherim. And then he basically borrows assets from other people so that he'll have something to eat. And he did this whole ruse, he did this whole scheme in order to avoid having to pay his creditor. So lo to'il armaso, his deceit will not be helpful. Mishum shekol haba b'harama v'tachbula la'avkia takanos chachamim v'kol shkein ligzol es chavero chayavim chachmei hador levatel kavanasa. So anytime Beis Din perceives that someone is trying to be deceitful in order to either shirk a rabbinic obligation or to shirk his debts and to commit theft. So the Beis Din has an obligation, not just the permission, but they have an obligation to try and foil his plans. Afal pisha ein raya rak umdinus hamochichos heitev. And that's true even if they don't have absolute evidence, but they suspect that something fishy is going on. They have an obligation to step in to protect the members of the community from someone who's trying to commit fraud. Halavai that we had Batei Din like that today. Okay, the Alkain, Kasvu HaPoskim, and based on that, the Poskim write, Sheyesh Lamalvil Ligavos Chovo Mimakabel Hamatana, Afilu Hu Milva Alpeh Makabel Hamatana. So, and therefore, the Poskim write that the creditor, even though he only has an oral loan, let's say there are witnesses, but he can, let's say, go to the guy who received the assets of the debtor and actually collect the money from him. Umashbianis makabel hamatan al das Beis Din below harama umirma kama kibel matana mehalove v'yigbu beis hadin lebala chov chovo mikol mashakibel. They make the person who received the gift swear how much he received as a gift from the creditor, and then they will collect on the debt based on the assets that are available from the gift that he received. And that's how they can, because essentially what he's saying is the Beis Din has an obligation to be proactive. And where is he quoting from? He's the Shulchan Aruch writes, in Hirviach Kalim Bischora or Beribis Ba'osa Matana, he says, let's say the gift recipient, from the debtor's estate, he says, yes, I received a gift from the debtor, but he only gave me $1,000. He didn't give me the amount on the loan, which was like $10,000. But Beis Din sees that this guy is living on the high horse because maybe he is an industrious businessman. He profited from other investments, or he took the money that the guy gave him and invested it well. Ein ha-Beis Din megavin lo meharevach. The Beis Din doesn't have a right to collect any more than what the initial gift was to the recipient. They can't say, well, you took his money and invested it, so we're going to take the principal plus whatever you profited from it, right? So that you don't have to do. So midafilu mikarkoi hamishubadim lamalva imacha lokeach o mekabel matana haperos chamashanim ba balchoi v'goiva hakaka kamoshihi v'enu motzi miyadam haperos. And the proof is that even when a creditor has a lien on a property and a third party consumed the produce off of that liened property, the creditor can only collect from the property itself. He can't demand that whoever ate the produce pay him, for additional monies that he's owed. So the fact is, you can only collect from the principal amount that was given to the gift recipient. Uveramasham kasa b'shem harishonim shimnira lebeistin shelo kivnu la'arma rak lamatana gemura kana hamakabel afal gav shahisa kavanaso lahavriach. But if it was a sincere gift, the Rama writes, then the Beis Din can't accept it, can't confiscate the money. Ubesimin zayin kasav maran hakosev kol nechasav la'achar ve'achar kach lava me'acherim ubebo hamal ve'legabos chovo mitzvah lahotzi shtar matana shekadam lishtar achov v'akol roim shafal pi shekasav kol nechasav la'acherim hu machzik bahen v'nosei v'nosim bahem u'me'olam lo yatsu mi'reshuso. So the other case that we're dealing with over here is that, let's say I give $1,000. In other words, I owe someone $10,000. So, and I want to divest myself. So I take the $10,000, I give it to Ron, and I say, here, hold on to this. I'm giving it to you as a gift. But then I say to Ron the next day, Ron, can I borrow $1,000? I'll pay you back. So in other words, I'm living off of the money that I gave to Ron, but in a surreptitious way. So in that kind of situation, Beis Din has an obligation to step in for sure in that case. The Beis Din has to really evaluate, was it a sincere gift or was it not a sincere gift? If they clearly see that some kind of shenanigans are going on, then they have an obligation to step in. But if they assess that the guy wasn't just doing it to divest himself of his obligations, but he actually did give a gift to somebody else, sincerely, not realizing that he was going to, let's say, go mechula the next day, then the Beis Din doesn't have a right to just take someone else's item unless there was a lien on the guy's property. If there was a lien on his property and I gifted the house, to one of my kids, not realizing that I wouldn't be able to pay back the loan. So since there was a lien on the property, because that was what was written in the loan documents, so then the guy could go to Beis Din and get the house back.
So how would this relate to someone who's a businessman, puts a house in his wife's name, just so he can protect his business from any liability?
Right. So there, I don't think that halacha would object to that, because he's not doing it to steal from other people. He's doing it like in advance of doing any business. He basically says, here, honey,
Doing it as a protection if he messes up.
if he messes up, I don't want to be homeless. Yeah. So I think there it's because he's not specifically trying to cheat any specific party, any individual, that we would allow such a thing in halacha.
It's the same in secular law too. If it's the difference between tax evasion and tax planning, right? If you're trying to evade your tax liability and whatever, the CRA doesn't like that, neither do the courts. But if you plan before problems arise and structure it properly, the same thing with transferring property to your wife or your kids or whatever. If it's pre-problem, then with creditors, then it's okay. But if you already have a creditor and you're trying to defeat the creditor's interest by transferring property, it's called a fraudulent conveyance with no consideration. But if you give them a mortgage, they give you a mortgage back or something, then it's okay. It's the same thing.
Okay, very good.
But also, Rabbi, if we were living in a world of halacha where doesn't when we learn that the women's possessions are really owned by the man, so that the man
Technically, yes, but a husband does have a right to directly gift his wife and exclude himself from ownership. Like I can give a gift to my wife and explicitly state, I do not acquire this item that I've given you. The husband will still have rights of usage so long as they're married. But if he clearly writes in the transaction documents that I hereby divest myself of all ownership, then even in halacha, it goes to his wife. Okay. Okay, so there's more sources here, but we'll just go on to the next one. Okay. Chiyuv lahalvos b'pironta. Okay. She'ela kishahaloi ve'eno rotza lifroakim b'tashlumim ketanim. Let's say the debtor acknowledges the loan, but he only wants to pay it off in installments, right? Kagon she'en lo lifroas halva b'vas achas. He doesn't have enough money to pay it all back. Even though the loan is matured, he says, I can't pay you all at once. I'm going to have to pay it off slowly. Hayim hamalva chayiv lahalvos lo. Oh, I'm sorry, this is before the loan is made. So the guy comes to him and says, I want to borrow money from you, but I'm having trouble generating income in the short term. So I want to be able to pay this off in installments. So, and he says, and you know you have a mitzvah to lend me money. So, Hayim hamalva chayev lahalvos lo, va'eno mechuyev mitzad adin lahalvos. So is there any obligation? Should the person with money feel an obligation to lend money in such an instance? Or can he say, listen, I'm happy to lend money to people in need, but I don't want this installment payment. It's such a pain in the neck. I'm gonna have to keep track of how much you still owe me. I'm gonna have to write you a receipt every single time. This is a drag, man. I'll lend you the money, but you got to guarantee that it's going to be deliverable in full payback by such and such a date. If you can't do it, I'm not interested. So the answer is like, should a person of means feel obligated not only to lend money, but also to lend money on the debtor's terms of small installment paybacks? So Misha Mevakesh Halva Aveni Achalifro Bevas Achas Eliim Ma'at Ma'at Ena Mechuyev Lahalvas Lo Ba'ofen Hazeh Mitzad Adin. So Rabbi Cohen says that halachically you have no obligation to lend them the money. Aval Mitzad Geder Ahava Ve'achva Nocham Lahetiv Gam Ba'ofen Hazeh. But from the perspective of loving your fellow Jew and feeling like he's your brother, whatever you can do, to make him whole, you should try whatever in any way you can, even if you know it's going to be a real drag. So in other words, you can say, this is inconvenient for me, I'm not interested, and you're completely within your rights. Completely within your rights. You don't have to go to bed guilty. But at the same time, if you feel like, let me do a solid for this guy, and I really see he's out on his luck. So then it's still nachon. It's still a good thing and a proper thing if you can handle it. V'im kishemekabel hapiron b'tashlumin lo yigrom lo hefsid yeshalav chiyuv lahalvos lo. And let's say it's not going to cost you any money by letting him pay you back in small installments. Because let's say you have plenty of reserves, you have plenty of cash reserves. He's asking to borrow $10,000, but he wants to pay you back $1,000 a year for the next 10 years. Okay? So, he says, but let's say, you won't notice the loss of that 10,000 because thank God you're blessed, right? If it's not going to make a huge difference, so then even halachically, if you can afford it, you may have an obligation to the extent that anyone has an obligation to lend money, right? In other words, you can always get out of the obligation to lend money by virtue of the fact that there could be other compelling reasons why you wouldn't.
There's also a third position between lump sum and installment payments for a lender, is that if you default in any of your $50 a month payments, then the balance of the debt is accelerating. You owe it now. So there are notes that basically say you can pay $100 a month, but if you default, then the balance of the $9,990 now becomes due and payable. They structure notes like that.
Right. So to incentivize the guy.
Yeah.
Right. So he's quoting the Sefer Avas Chesed, once again quoting the Chafetz Chaim on this matter. Yeah, so in the previous halacha, he quoted the Rama also. Mishi yesh lo shtar al chaver lizman, uba b'soch hazman lebeistin. A person is owed money. He's got a promissory note, and the loan has not yet matured. And he comes to Beis-Din and he says, Matsasi minichse ploni, vani yoreshim yavo liyado yavrichem mimeni, velo emtza makom lagabos chovi. In other words, the Ramah gives this exact case of a guy who's concerned, he comes to Beis-Din and says, I see what this guy's doing is divesting. So if the Dayan sees that there's truth to what the guy is saying, so then he can stop the gift from taking place until the debt is paid. Okay. All right, we'll hold it here for today. Have a great day, everybody.